Good morning and happy Wednesday. I am going to do my one little check to make sure this live stream is going to all the places that I asked it to go and be right with you. Today we're talking about losing passion and dreading work. Yes, and does it sound familiar to anybody? I've certainly been in that place before, right? So, all right, I think I can. All right. So there it is. I did that little thing and I'm all set to go. Thank you for joining me. If you're here live or for the replay, doesn't even really matter. I'm happy to have you. And if you have comments or questions and they don't show up, like if I don't reply, that means I may not be seeing them on this feed, but I will definitely check every one of these feeds to see what people said and what their questions are, and I'll get back to you. You can also always message me on most of these platforms that I'm showing this video. So again, welcome to Burnout Hiding in Plain Sight, where I talk about some of the habits, policies, practices, patterns, things that can keep us stuck in a way that leads to burnout, even though we just might not be noticing it sometimes. Or even sometimes we'll just be in a pattern that just seems so normal and it's burning us out, but we don't really recognize it, right? So today I'm talking about that loss of passion that often accompanies burnout. And I would say, like, when I first started studying burnout many years ago as a psychologist, one of the first things I learned as a symptom of burnout was that loss of fulfillment that people find. So I will tell you what that looks like, right? So I'll give you myself as an example. When I first started working, I had a dream job. It was the job I wanted. I wanted to work in a community mental health center in a local community. I wanted to be there, like right in the heart of things, helping people navigate and blend what their community resources and family resources were with their needs, like figuring out what was available to you in your family, in your community, and helping people make all those things work for them. And then it sort of reached this point in that organization where they were shifting and moving to a much more medical model than a more community-based model. And that just did not sit right inside me. I'm like, so this isn't building a relationship with the community that I want, that helps to sustain people and to recognize that sometimes we have mental health challenges. It's not just because of something that's going on inside of us. That's one piece of it. But there's also this world around us that is important for us to modify and to change so that we can be okay. So it did not match my values. And I just started to say, I started dreading going to work. I didn't want to go. And luckily for me at that time, I had two really great mentors, and they understood emotionally where I was, and they were very supportive. And at that time, what I chose to do was, okay, there are parts of my job that I still really, really love. I still really love working with families. I still really loved working with community organizations. And so I focused on that as I started to search for something else. And that's what saved me in that moment, right? But I was in that place of I don't want to go to work. Um, and I've talked to many professionals who say the same thing. Oftentimes it happens after we've gotten exhausted. So how do we get to this place where we're I don't want to go. I don't want to go. Don't make me go. Right? We get there sometimes because of the overwhelm and the emotional burden of it. Many of us have jobs that are fairly complex and that require a lot of like technical skills, moving things around, navigating certain things. And so and also our genius has to come into play, right? We have to figure out how to make all those things work, right? So we figure that out. And then sometimes, though, the work we're doing is so emotionally heavy that we just get worn out from not having the emotional resources, the emotional support we need to get it done. And we start to disconnect from it, right? So we're then going through the motions of doing the thing because we're really, really good at it, but it doesn't feel like us anymore. You also could see this in sometimes someone has built a business and the business is going really well. They're serving their clients, they're doing really well, and they're leading this organization now, right? They have people working with, they have a team, and they're looking at it and they're saying, I was building something that I thought was really going to change people's lives, and it has, but I'm also noticing this other thing is going really, really wrong. And so there's something that feels out of alignment, right? There's a values misalignment. Something's not right for them. So that is another way, which is what happened for me. There was a value misalignment. It just didn't work for me anymore. Plus, I also had the emotional, like, wow, I'm working with families and kids. Sometimes there's just not enough community resources to really try to make a difference. And then you're trying to figure out, well, how do I piece something together? So sometimes the emotional weight of it. Why that wasn't so hard for me in that particular situation was because the work mattered so much and I had a lot of mentorship. I had a lot of emotional support. But when you're in that place where you are the one who's leading and you're noticing that there are pieces missing and you can't figure out what to do about them, or you're noticing some change and it doesn't feel right in your industry and it doesn't feel right to you, you can get to that place where it just feels like, I I don't feel like it doesn't feel like me anymore. You've lost your passion for it. I remember actually creating a post on, I used to create like posts called about sort of this is what we call like a loss of spiritual energy, right? You've spiritual exhaustion. So if you've heard me talk about energy management, and we talk about different aspects of energy: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And that spiritual energy is that sense of fulfillment and connection to the work, right? The sense that what you're doing is a reflection of something that's deeper in you, and a reflection of your connection to the world, the people, life around you, and it feeds you, right? You give to the work and the work gives back to you. But when we reach this point of, we've lost the sense that our values are aligned with it, or maybe the emotional burden is too heavy, and we start to disconnect from the work, now we're like in what we could call, or going into spiritual exhaustion, right? We're losing that spiritual energy that sort of nurtures us to stay connected with the work. I've and I was about to say that sometimes I've written posts about this, and people have sent me messages and said, "Oh my God, this is exactly where I am." Sometimes this can happen too. I'll say the last thing that comes to my mind about how we can get to this place is sometimes we can be in a position where the money is really, really good, but the pace of it, what's being asked of us, is really beyond what we want. We've disconnected because now we're just sort of like machine like, and we're trying to make, but the money's really good, and it's hard to replace that amount of money. So sometimes people feel like, right, I've heard some coaches call it golden handcuffs. So people get caught because they're making, this really great living, but they're also losing their life at the same time. And they feel that disconnection. So how do we start to reconnect? You'll notice in my example, I said, when I was working in this facility, this mental health center, where it was like, oh, we're shifting the paradigm. Oh no, that doesn't match me. So there was for me this values misalignment. And I would say that in pretty much all of these situations, there's probably some values misalignment. That when you're being asked to do work that seems out of what you think is right, or you're being asked to do work and you're not getting the emotional support, somewhere inside of you, you're saying, wait a minute, people aren't really noticing my needs. I'm not in an environment where I matter. So that again, right? I think most of us want to feel that, there's some compassion for us in our environment, some empathy, at least in our environment. So when we see that, right, that sort of misalignment between us and the world around us, we start to disconnect. And so, how do we start to reconnect? Well, if there's some value that's being violated, right, you just notice, right, what was the value that was being violated? I would say for me, when I look back on that, it was a silencing of the voices of the people in the community. That's what bothered me, and I was really there because I wanted to elevate their voices. I could see the kind of lives they wanted to build for themselves and their children. I could, it felt like I felt this connection to what they wanted to create in the world. And then when the organization shifted its model, I was like, but you're not hearing. You will not hear people in this model the way you're, right. You could, but the way it was being organized, they would not be hearing the community voices. So then I said, well, I can hear the voices by working with clients and doing that and helping them to think through how to make sure they get what they need. So that's where I put my focus until I found another position that became my second dream job, right? I still will say it's probably the job I love the most of all the careers I've had in my career as a psychologist. It is the position that I love the most. So when you can realign with something that really matters to you and allow that to guide you, this can be your first step out of that disconnection, out of that loss of passion, back toward, right? Back out of burnout, back toward what you really want, right? Because this is all about burnout, what's on the other side, right? If we're in this like loss of passion, this dreading work, then how do we begin to see that actually there is another side? I'm going to repeat this. This is the third part of this series, and I probably said it every time, but everything has a complement. That's the flexibility principle that I talk about in Life in Four-Part Harmony. Everything has a complement. So if you're in this place of dread, what would be the opposite of dread? And what is the value? What is the thing that sparks you that would allow you to start to take your first step out of dread? Again, for me, it was knowing that I had these relationships with families where I could still focus on helping them make their voices known, helping, and I had this great mentor, right, who taught me all about this multi-systems model. So how do you get people to raise their voices, to say what they need? That was one of the things I learned from her, right? So I started to put that into play for myself. And then I started to listen to my voice, right? The voice inside me said, this is also a call for you to say, where else can you go where you can uplift voices and your voice will be heard? So then I applied for another position and I got that position. And again, I told you that's one of the jobs I love the most. So when you're in this loss of passion place, this loss of hmm, love for your work, start to get that back by just saying, all right, something is violated here, because that loss feeling, that dread is telling you something, right? It's telling you maybe a violation of values, maybe there's something missing here for me. And how do I start to find that thing and begin to make my way out and create a plan? So my plan was to move to a new position. So I started looking for new positions. But I also had to find a plan for being able to be where I was until I found that next position, right? So the connecting to your values, I will say, is a real key and a real resource that will support you when you're in this place of dread, and will help you because your values are really also a reflection of something deeper. And I say one of those deeper things is your purpose. Your values connect to what you deeply believe about life. And also, there's a sense in you of what really matters to you, you want to do and bring into your life. That's purpose. And when you can start to connect to something that maybe brings you back a little bit closer to who you see yourself to be in the world, then you start to have some fuel, right? You start to have some room. You're not weighed down by the dread and the loss of passion. You start to feel a little bit of energy, enough to start moving toward what you really want, right? So on the other side of burnout, when you get through this, then you're back to the place of love for what you do and how that work is a reflection of something deeper, right? Thank you all for joining me. Yeah, I'm about at 12 or 14 minutes or so. So that's about what I like to do, somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes of these presentations. And I don't see any comments, but I will check. And if there are some, be certain that I will get back to you. All right. Have a beautiful, beautiful Wednesday.